You don't just wake up one morning and decide that you're going to change your entire life. Usually there's some event in your life that's going to give you an epiphany, and that's what I experienced. We were actually photographing a penguin colony at a place called Brown Station in Antarctica. And I took a look down into the bay and I noticed that there were two groups of whales. So we decided to grab a Zodiac. We approached the whales. They were humpback whales. Shut the engine off and coasted right up beside them to the point where you could actually reach over the side and touch them. And they knew exactly where we were. It was amazing. We didn't feel threatened in any way whatsoever. And as soon as we got there, he blew.
There it is.
It was so close that we could smell the fish on the breath of the exhalation of the whale. And then the most incredible thing I've ever experienced in my life, the whale spoke to me. He was clearly trying to communicate with us, and we would talk, and the whale would talk back to us. And this went on for about 15 minutes. We went back to the ship, walking up the gangway, and one of the passengers on the boat looked at me and said they saw the whole thing, and they asked me to tell them what happened, and I opened my mouth and the words wouldn't come out, and I started to cry.
My name is Ron Goodland. My career path led me into dentistry, but my life's passion has always been photography. When I was 14, my mother bought me my first camera. It was meant to be a distraction from the anguish of watching my father dying of cancer. Whenever I could, I would find refuge in the peace of nature, hoping that my photographs could make a difference. Somehow, by capturing a moment in time, I would help erase those painful memories of the past. Maybe I was dreaming an impossible dream. Eventually, I was making these images with a purpose, to bring attention to the plight of our natural world and to help inspire others. Changing the world, one image at a time. For years, I'd been showing my photographs, but I wanted to make a greater impact. I just didn't know how. It was a dilemma. I needed to make a difference. I went on a photography trip to the Great Bear Rainforest with a new camera that had some limited ability to shoot video. So I decided to give it a try. I was blown away at how effective the video imagery was.
It changed everything for me, and I realized that the story that I could tell through video would be more impactful than just looking at my still photographs.
After my experience in Antarctica, I was searching for what the whale was calling on me to do. I interpreted that conversation as the whale asking for help. And the help he needed was protection from the human beings that are destroying our planet. My mission had suddenly become clear to me. To go down the path to learn about our environment, learning to use video to show the effects of climate change, so I could tell the stories about what nature is trying to tell us. From the penguins in Antarctica to the melting glaciers in the Arctic, telling the stories of loss of habitats and species on the verge of extinction. I had to do this without any financial backing, a zero budget, and using a camera that is designed specifically for photography, not for video. This was going to be one of my life's biggest challenges. I asked myself, why was I doing this? Was I like Don Quixote, slashing at the windmills, trying to save the world? Was this going to be my impossible dream? I needed to become an expert in climate change. So I started by researching the basics. It was overwhelming, and I wasn't sure about where to begin.
We know that humans have been putting extra carbon dioxide into the atmosphere for about 200 years. We know that temperatures have now increased by 1 degree. We know that that's consistent with the rate at which CO2 is going up in the atmosphere. And we also know that these changes are really unprecedented. Temperatures will continue to increase as long as we continue to emit greenhouse gases.
Going on the internet and reading books was one thing, but I needed to become more of an expert about climate change so that when I went out into the world, I could recognize and understand exactly what nature is telling us about how their habitats and environments are changing. I needed to go back to school. I found a perfect program offered by the University of California in Berkeley by Dr. Arnold Bloom. Multidisciplinary, comprehensive. It was very intense. After several months, I completed the course. And I really felt that now I had the credentials to support myself in the quest to find out what nature is trying to tell us. Dr. Bloom agreed to meet with me, so I bought a microphone and a plane ticket, put the camera in my bag, and trundled off to the University of California where Professor Bloom was teaching. This was the beginning of my journey to document what nature was trying to tell us.
So what life does affects the environment, and what the environment does affects life. There's this interaction that is quite strong. People are making the direct connection between climate change and the increased risk of forest fires. It's not hypothetical. So people are very aware that they need to do something to address that problem. There's enough information out there to realize that humans are the equation that is driving those changes.
While I was there touring some of the areas decimated by wildfires, I heard about a colony of elephant seals over on the Pacific coast, only a couple of hours away. These amazing creatures are at risk due to the effects of global warming and climate change. I decided to go and investigate what they are trying to tell us. Location, location, location. All around the world, beachfront property has become the most valuable. Urban sprawl has forced these northern elephant seals to live on only a very few small areas of beach that have been relegated as protected zones. They return once a year to this particular stretch of beach, where the pups will be born and nurtured until it is time for them to fend for themselves. Global warming, climate change, and the resulting acidification of the ocean has affected their food supply. And so the elephant seals must now travel huge distances for prolonged periods of time so they can find enough food to build up their fat reserves necessary to survive next year's mating and birthing season. This diminished food supply is concerning, and it is projected that the elephant seal populations will decline under this increasing food stress. The second concern is loss of habitat. Not only are there very few remaining protected areas for these animals to live, but the beaches are shrinking. Climate change is causing larger and more violent storms. And the rising sea levels from the melting glaciers are eroding the beaches. This will result in more animals being crammed into smaller spaces, leading to more intense territorial fighting amongst the females for room to birth, nurture, and protect their pups. Quite simply, these elephant seals will run out of room. As we marvel at their sheer size, we have to wonder if the magnificent elephant seals will be added to the list of endangered species. With Joshua Tree National Park in the Mojave Desert only a couple of hours away, it got me thinking. It seems like most of the climate change research is happening in the polar regions. I wondered what kind of climate change research is happening in the desert. It was time to reach out to an expert. Dr. Cameron Barrows at UC Riverside.
We live in a desert, obviously, and one of the hottest, driest places on Earth. And climate change is making it even hotter and drier. Well, the bighorn sheep are sort of the celebrity species around here, and there's a lot of people doing research on them. But we're really focusing on the more cryptic species, some of the lizards. One of the lizards that we're studying and have been studying is a federally endangered species called the Coachella Valley fringe-toed lizard, and it only lives on sand dunes. And it only lives on the sand dunes that are in the Coachella Valley. What we noticed, or what I noticed, were these little biting flies that I would see on their backs. And you'd see these bright red dots on their back, and those were it's a type of fly called a midge, or bloodsuckers, just like mosquitoes. Issue that I think is particularly interesting is that the fly, just like a mosquito, can transmit malaria, and so that's the sort of thing that we're looking at. As the environment gets warmer, those insects that carry diseases like malaria can proliferate. The one mosquito that carries the kind of malaria that affects us was never here in the Coachella Valley because we would always have cold winters, and the winters would be so cold with frosts and freezing temperatures, that the mosquitoes couldn't survive. That's all changed. We haven't had a frost or freezing temperature here in the Coachella Valley for over a decade, probably multiple decades, because of the warming. That mosquito is now here in the Coachella Valley. And so it's not just malaria, it's Newcastle's disease, and it's dengue fever, and it's all sorts of different types of things like that. And this particular mosquito is the vector. And I see that the mosquitoes abundant now. I see them all the time. It speaks to the responsibility we have as stewards of this planet. And so if we have a future generation that is hamstrung by environmental problems and the lack of economic opportunities because of what we've chosen to do now, we're responsible for that. And I think if our grandchildren look back at us and say, why did you do it? We have to take blame for it. We can't push it off and say, well, it was, the information wasn't there. Well, the information was there. It was there all along. Well, the industry wasn't supporting it. Well, the industry is only supporting what people will support. And so it starts with individual choices.
As Dr. Barrows said, it starts with individual choices. I felt the acid building in the pit of my stomach. Even though I was trying to make a difference by exposing what effects global warming is having, I realized that I was part of the problem. Not only was my travel increasing my carbon footprint, but my diet was heavily based on meat. I decided that I must continue my quest. But I needed to make some changes. By reducing my travel carbon footprint, and I vowed to be more responsible in my diet. I realized I needed to change my behaviors, to be a better steward of the environment, and that got me thinking about what I could do to make an impact on other people, to influence them to make these same changes. I reached out to another expert, psychologist Dr. Pablo Gomez.
We are really good as human beings at preserving a narrative in which we are the hero of the story. So whenever the story makes us not seem like the hero, we have a hard time. That even for those of us that see climate change as the biggest challenge in our lifetimes, sometimes we're not able to make the small behavioral changes because the personal cost versus the global benefit don't match. The personal cost is higher than my perceived benefit. Driving a little more, or having a bigger house, right? The personal joy of having a 6-bedroom house is larger than what they perceive as reducing their carbon footprint if they had a 2-bedroom house.
But my experience is that nowadays, most decisions are driven by selfishness, money, and greed. Unfortunately, when making decisions, most people do not look at the big picture. We live in a society based on immediate gratification. And so the environment, the planet, and our future are compromised.
A couple of years ago, there was this very strong move against plastic straws. If I think about why it was solved, my sense is because people could make money out of selling the metal straws, the glass straws. So I would see people, even people that are not super into a green lifestyle, quote unquote, be very happy to purchase new straws and those cute straws with a cover and all that stuff, because at the end, right, it was tapping into that very primal need to buy things. A lot of our bigger problems, nobody would make money, and actually people would lose money. It has become more difficult to address. We are fundamentally selfish, a selfish species that should motivate even the people that are a little more selfish to take action. You want to tell people how healthy and how good you feel not eating meat and using your bike more and being more mindful about your choices. Just do that, right? And you be the example of that more mindful life, a life that takes the climate more into account, that when people see your satisfaction and your life improved, they would be more likely to make a change than if you try to say, blah, 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 blah. You shouldn't do that, and you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do that, because that's always going to receive pushback.
Well, there was one thing I couldn't disagree with Dr. Gomez more. In this day and age, I don't think setting a good example really does much to influence others. I've become very cynical. But Dr. Gomez was right on when he says, we are a very selfish species. People make decisions that benefit themselves first. Rarely do they take into account the effect that that decision will have on others, let alone the environment. I was about to put the cost versus benefit scenario to the test, but I was feeling very conflicted and ultimately very guilty. As I continued my scheduled itinerary, flying from California to Hawaii, where I was to spend a week with my grandkids, and to use it as an opportunity to see firsthand how climate change is affecting the Hawaiian sea turtles. I squirmed in my seat as I flew to Hawaii. I asked myself if I was using this opportunity to study the sea turtles to justify my travel because I was trying to save the world. I came to the conclusion that I was not being a good steward of the planet, and at that moment it hit me. I needed to make some drastic changes to help protect my grandchildren's future. And so I made a promise to do better. Usually, I travel from Toronto to California 4 times a year. I let them know that I would only be visiting once a year from now on. It was a drastic and very difficult decision. But I'm committed to doing my part to protect their future. I spent a wonderful week with my grandkids, and together we visited the beach to watch the sea turtles, showing them the wonders of our natural world. Each night at dusk, the volunteers clear the beach of the day's garbage and mark out a no people zone. The sea turtles are coming, and they need to rest. As they make their way into the lagoon, they must traverse the huge waves and somehow avoid being thrown against the rocks. It was an exciting sight to watch these huge turtles emerge from the waves. By the time the sun sets, there can be as many as 30 sea turtles using this beach as a rest stop. By morning, many have already left to forage for food out in the Pacific. Some of the turtles are in no hurry. Some just want to sleep a little longer. Some will contract human diseases, such as this herpes virus, from the human waste that is pumped into our oceans. Now they are facing their biggest threat: climate change. The melting Arctic, Greenland, and Antarctic ice is causing a rise in sea levels. That, in combination with the increasing intensity of weather events, is causing the loss of the only place where these turtles lay their eggs. The French Atoll, a small area of sandy shoals some 500 miles off Hawaii. Once per year, the female honu will swim huge distances to find a spot on that beach to lay their eggs. The gender of the baby is determined by the average temperature during egg incubation. When it's warmer, only females will be born. And because of global warming, the male populations are in steep decline. Soon, there will be no more males to mate with, and the species will become extinct. But as sea levels rise, these sandy atolls will be underwater, and there will be nowhere left for the turtles to lay their eggs. The honu will be only a memory. I was disheartened. I was discouraged. I thought perhaps maybe it would be better to become a climate activist. Captain Paul Watson, the founder of Greenpeace, Sea Shepherd, and now the CPWF, a non-profit organization promoting non-destructive but violent interference to save our oceans. I spoke with him via internet.
I think that, the strength of an ecosystem is dependent upon diversity. Therefore, the strength of any movement has to be dependent upon diversity. So that approach can be education, litigation, legislation, direct action. It all works towards the same thing. But we have to bring all of these things together. I mean, the things that we could do as far as protesting, for example, you can't do today. I mean, I blockaded St. John's Harbor's Newfoundland for a week, kept the sealing fleet from coming out. If I tried that today, it'd be blown out of the water. So we have a lot less freedoms today. People have to decide what are my skills, what are my abilities, and what am I passionate about, and then apply those skills and abilities to that passion. That we can all have that power to do that if we just apply ourselves and harness courage, imagination to our passion. Greta Thunberg, one small, little girl did to change the world. And what this planet will be like a million years from now will be very much the result of what we're doing right now, our behavior right now. But unfortunately, very few people look ahead that far. I mean, politically to the next election, maybe, in business to the next quarter, that kind of thing. There's really no long-term projections and looking at the consequences of our actions, say 10, 20, 100 years from now. So really, it gets right down to the fact that there's too many people, too much consumption, and too much pollution. I got a call from Brett Hume from Fox News, who he interviewed me, and he said, did you actually say that worms, trees, and bees were more important than people? And I said, yes, I did. And he said, well, how could you say something so outrageous like that? And I said, well, because for the very simple fact that trees, bees, and worms can live here without us, but we can't live here without them. The problem in our world today is this anthropocentric point of view that we created, that everything was created for us, even though the world's 4 billion years old. We decided that it was just created for us and that we're all important. And therefore, everything else is unimportant. And I think that we really have to develop a biocentric view that we have to live in harmony with all these other species.
Well, I was inspired, and I decided to try my hand at some direct action techniques. So you know that by idling your car, it's really not good for the environment. So, if you could just turn the car off when you're not doing anything, that would really be helpful for the environment.
Really?
Yeah.
Come on, mind your own business.
Really?
Yeah.
All right, well, yeah. Thanks a lot for helping the environment. Have a good day. Hope your grandchildren live.
Thank you.
Dr. Gomez was right. You don't seem to get very far by pointing your finger at someone and telling them that they're wrong. And besides, this wasn't the far-reaching impact that I was trying to make. In my efforts to reduce my carbon footprint, I decided not to return to Antarctica. Instead, I combed through any video footage that I had captured on my previous 2 adventures. So I can show you this modern version of the canary in the coal mine. The penguins are trying to tell us something. Ron Naveen, the founder of Oceanites, as well as the researchers we traveled with, are truly on the front lines of climate change research. What are they doing, you may ask? Well, basically, they're counting penguins. They tag along with ecotourism groups and count the nests in the various colonies. In conjunction with satellite imagery, this information is correlated with sea ice concentrations and is compiled and published in a yearly guide. We saw large colonies of Gentoo penguins, who seem to be thriving in the warmer and wetter conditions. They were very busy stealing stones from one another to build nests that allow water to drain out, because if the eggs get wet, they won't hatch. More chicks hatching mean more Gentoos survive. But you sure don't want to get caught stealing stones. Penguins rely on tiny shrimp-like creatures called krill. But the Gentoos can dive deeper than the other penguin species, so they have more food options. They can also catch small fish. We saw a noticeable scarcity of the other types of penguins. Chinstraps, Adelies, and the Magellanics are all in decline. The Magellanics are the hardest hit, and that is the easiest to explain, because they build their nests in burrows below the ground. With global warming, there are more rain events instead of snow, and the burrows get flooded. The eggs get wet, and the chicks don't hatch. For the chicks that do hatch, they are born with down feathers. That protects them from the cold, but they're not waterproof. So if the chick gets wet, the down feathers no longer protect it from the cold. The chick will die of hypothermia. The krill population is in steep decline. The krill feed off the plankton that in turn feed off the algae that is found on the underside of the sea ice. The ice supports the food chain. No ice means no krill. And so we rarely see chinstrap and Adelie colonies in the areas where there is little to no sea ice, which now means almost everywhere. Global warming is causing acidification of the ocean, and that disrupts the plankton, the very basis of the food chain. Commercial krill fishing is raping the oceans of this food staple for the penguins and the whales. It's called a food chain because each species supports the other. Amazingly, the smallest species rely on the largest species for their sustenance in the form of whale poop. Killing our whales is a huge blow to the entire food chain. And so this penguin research is warning us, like the canaries in the coal mines, that we are headed for disaster. The Adelies and the chinstraps are starving.
One of the most alarming things today, I think, is the fact that since 1950, there's been a 40% diminishment in phytoplankton populations in the sea. And yet we just take it for granted. Most people aren't aware of it or don't think about it. But that probably is one of the most important things that we should be concerned about, is the survival of phytoplankton in the sea. Phytoplankton provides up to 70% of the oxygen in the air we breathe and sequesters enormous amounts of CO2. And so if phytoplankton were to disappear from the sea, then we will all die. We don't live without phytoplankton. It's the very foundation of life on this planet.
The more I looked into the effects of global warming, the more serious and far-reaching they were proving to be. Captain Paul Watson led me to understand more about the power of the big corporations. I began to be more aware of what I was seeing and hearing on the media. Now, instead of the big companies denying that climate change exists, they're trying to spin it so that we're brainwashed into believing that they're actually helping to mitigate climate change. Do they really think they can justify the simple truth that they are killing off the planet?
You know, there's a lot of greenwashing, and that's a term that means that companies will tout what they're doing to save the environment when in fact it may not be as significant as their propaganda states.
I mean, there's a lot of meetings, a lot of petitions, there's a lot of talk. You know, the people who are trying to solve the problem are actually being financed by the people who are causing the problem.
Money is power. They are trying to make us believe that they are the good guys, as a means to even greater profits. The amount of greed and corruption is absolutely unbelievable. Maybe the answer lies within the old ways of doing things, when we had a simpler life, one of sustainability and not excess. The indigenous cultures seem to understand this. On one of my previous photography trips to the Arctic, we visited the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge called ANWR. This protected area in Alaska on the Beaufort Sea is a haven for polar bears who gather here to go out onto the sea ice to breed, hunt, and birth their young. But global warming has changed all that. I thought polar bears were supposed to be white. These polar bears wander around the sandbars waiting for the ice that no longer comes. They've been forced to become scavengers, eating dead seagulls and eggs from nests. Sometimes they'll wander into the village in search of any sort of food, usually raiding the garbage. In this traditional Inupiat village, the people follow the old ways. They subsist on a diet of vegetables, elk meat, and whale blubber. The Inupiat understand the polar bears are starving. They have built a special relationship with the polar bears, who call this area home. After they've distributed the whale blubber to the village, they place the remainder on an island called the bone pile for the bears to eat. The Inupiat are keeping these bears from starving. But like everything else, things are changing. No longer will the Inupiat be able to follow their traditional ways. During his presidency, Donald Trump mandated that the area could now be opened to oil drilling. This will spell the end to the polar bears in this region. I was feeling very discouraged. It seems like money and greed always wins the day, leaving global warming merely a talking point, one that gets pushed aside in favor of profits. I had a planned trip to the Arctic to capture the images of climate change firsthand, to see what nature is trying to tell us, and to hear what the scientific experts who are doing the climate change research want us to understand.
We have like 7 times the speed of warming that we see on the rest of the planet. So what we see happening in the Arctic is what we're yet to see in other places. We have a lot of environmental research going on to understand what the future will bring for the rest of the planet.
Traveling to the Arctic would be a big burden on my carbon footprint. But I had to justify this with knowing that the impact these images will have will change the behavior of many of the people who see this, and they will become better stewards of our planet. This will ultimately motivate many people to reduce their carbon footprint.
Actually, the Earth is warming more in the Arctic region because the sea ice is melting and sea ice is white. And as most of you will know, also with clothing, white reflects heat. So the more sea ice there is, the colder it gets because of that. When the sea ice is melting, it leaves the darker sea. So all the ice around the darker sea will melt quicker because the darkness of the sea absorbs the heat.
It's going to get very wet, it's going to get very warm, it's going to get very extreme. That's what we're already seeing all over the place. We see avalanches, we see mudslides, we see glaciers collapsing and just disappearing. And yeah, massive rainstorms. Say goodbye to ice.
So the ice is actually full of life, but there is about like more than 2,000 species that live within the ice and also under the ice. So when the ice melts, to imagine this like a house of cards where every card is a species, and if you take some card away, everything fall apart and collapse.
First you have the ice algae, and then you have the krill and the plankton eating that ice algae. And if the ice algae disappears, what are they eating? And then if the plankton disappears or changes, what is the fish eating? What is the whale eating? What is the bear eating? What's the seal eating?
There has never been a time when you could get so close to the North Pole on the water. The clock is ticking.
We expected to come here on this expedition ship to be able to see polar bears, walrus, various kind of seals and whales.
Very few decades that we have hundreds and thousands of species just disappearing, and they will keep going. Well, when it comes to animals, pretty much mass extinction.
Normally, we would have seen an abundance of seals, and they attract the polar bears. But most of the ice is gone. We hadn't seen any animals, so this bearded seal was a welcomed opportunity. It's really sad that a single animal sighting caused so much excitement. It was a stark reminder that this is a preview into our future.
Many people want to see polar bear, and when they come and see polar bear, they can fall in love with this animal, and then they want to do everything to try to protect them, talk to their friends and everything. So maybe it can be like a snowball effect and spread the word.
My name is Guillermina Braune. I'm from Ushuaia, Argentina. I'm an expedition guide. I drive zodiacs to watch wildlife in their environment. The experience being outside with watching animals, and I think that's the first print in our hearts to want to change something, to want to keep that ice that has the bear alive, I think that's the first impact, to see wildlife in the nature.
Polar bears rely on ice for many things. For food, because they eat mainly seals. So if there is less pack ice, there will be less access to seal. They will try to have a diet that is more land-based and try to eat birds or eggs. Or also now we see a behavior here in Svalbard about ambushing reindeer. But it's a really inefficient way for the bear to eat. Because seals, there is a lot of blubber, there is a lot of fat that it cannot find in birds and eggs and everything. So they try, but it's a really inefficient way to eat. I've seen polar bears starving. They cannot find pack ice, so they will try to swim, or they are on a patch of pack ice and they will try to swim to the other pack of pack ice. But because they cannot find it, they just like swim till actually they are exhausted and drown.
The expedition ship and the crew will not allow us to get anywhere close to the polar bears that would affect their natural behavior whatsoever.
If a polar bear who is hunting constantly gets disturbed by cruise ships every hour almost, he just can't live his normal life anymore. So that's why now there's more and more rules coming in place to protect the polar bears. It's really good to implement these rules and keep them as protected as we can.
The feeling that polar bears might not be here in the 10 to 15 years is very, very sad, because we are doing it with the way we live and the choices we make. So it's so weird that you can see the pure nature right now, but you know it will change and maybe disappear, and you feel maybe a little bit responsible for it too. But it starts with yourself.
At 2 o'clock.
In the water or on the ice?
Okay, very fine. On the ice.
The walrus are huge and quite dangerous. Their long, sharp tusks could easily puncture our little rubber boat. And they were surprisingly curious. We were a little nervous as they came very close alongside our Zodiac to check us out. Whoa. Walrus live in colonies on the sea ice, and that gives them their best access to food. They huddle together in a large mass of grunting blubber. Without the sea ice, they've been forced to find new accommodations. They now must huddle together on land, far from the food that they need. It's hard to find a suitable location to call home. They need a flat area because they're not suited too well to land travel. And so, these spots are overcrowded. The dominant males are in the center of the pack, constantly fighting for position, stabbing any other walrus who dares to disturb them by trying to take their spot, or even by moving around too much. Their thick skin and thick layer of blubber protects them. We saw many wounds and scarring from the sharp tusks. Melting sea ice has opened the Arctic waters to economic opportunities: commercial fishing, oil and gas exploration, and increased shipping through the sensitive marine habitats. Without good eyesight, these huge animals rely on their keen sense of smell and sense of hearing. They are very sensitive to these new and loud man-made noises. They become stressed very easily when approached, and this new man-made threat can cause stampedes, which will often result in the trampling death of many of the young. These walrus have nowhere else to go. Their days may be numbered.
Icebergs are coming from the glacier that's melting and calving, which is one of the biggest signs of climate change.
As we step off the boat, it is as if we are traveling into the future to view what global warming has in store for us.
We are at the Texas Bar. It's at the foot of a glacier at the end of one of the fjords off Svalbard. And it's snowing slightly. We were told on deck that it's 0 degrees, but it doesn't feel too bad.
We are seeing receding glaciers everywhere we go. This area used to be covered by a glacier. The melting is so dramatic. Global warming is affecting the Arctic more than anywhere else on the planet. We go on hikes and everything is melting. It's as if the world is melting from the top down.
It's so sad to see that.
Temperature is rising because of the climate change, and the Arctic, the ice is melting, and yeah, it's gonna look a lot different in the following years.
Say goodbye to ice.
Well, we're seeing the melting of or the thawing of permafrost in the high Arctic at a rate that's it's never been experienced in the history of humanity. I mean, this has been frozen since the last ice age. Is the release of pathogens long dormant in permafrost. And for instance, in 2017, a reindeer carcass was exposed carrying anthrax, which killed 1,000 reindeer and 1 human being. And that's another thing we have to be very, very concerned about. But I think probably the most important consideration is the melting of the permafrost is releasing incredibly high amounts of methane, which is a more lethal greenhouse gas than CO2.
I'm really, really worried about the future of the planet. It makes me really anxious, and we have to act right now. And the way we take action is too slow.
I've spoken to many number of experts and scientists in the field, and some of them I find are surprisingly optimistic that we as a human race will actually find some solutions and be able to turn this around.
The Pembina Institute is a charity and a clean energy think tank. And based on our evidence-based research, we advocate for policies in Canada and provide our best advice on what Canadian governments can be doing in their communities when it comes to climate action. The Government of Canada committed to reducing its greenhouse gas emissions by 40 to 45% below 2005 levels, and that's a really big, ambitious goal. So policies and regulations that curb emissions is really going to make a difference.
Is that really going to make a difference? We have had lobby groups, protests, international conferences, bringing the science and the will of the people to the governments. But what good has that done against the power of corporate money?
This problem has existed for decades, and we have done very little in reality. There's a lot of talk from governments about addressing climate change, but if you look at the performance over time, there has been very little progress. We are still a very high emission society. It's very easy to make promises at international conferences. It's much more difficult to deliver them, and the political costs of not doing them, not meeting those obligations, are not particularly high. In the current political environment, there's a lot of pressure to say good things about climate change and to have a marketable strategy. But you're not going to be held accountable when that plan falls apart. It's perhaps not surprising that we've made very little progress over the last 30 years, despite many different programs being announced. We continue to heavily subsidize the fossil fuels industry. We continue to invest in new infrastructure, new pipelines. It's hypocrisy in a lot of ways, isn't it? You know, our hydrocarbon-based society are deeply entrenched. Still, a lot of us have gas-powered vehicles. Still, a lot of us have natural gas-fired furnaces. We're all still participating in that economy, and there's a lot of infrastructure that's needed to support that. If we're not exploring for oil and gas, and we're not investing in transmission assets, that infrastructure is going to break down over time. We better have something to replace it. This is why, you know, partly why the transition is going to be so difficult. On the one hand, they're saying they want a transition, but on the other hand, they have to maintain this infrastructure, help people understand how complicated these things are, and how many obstacles we face.
A lot of research already done, and I feel like we have a lot of knowledge that we can actually use to implement changes in where electricity and energy comes from. It's just very slow to actually implement it.
And also money. There is a lot of lobby, I guess, that pay the campaign, and like a lot of corruption.
More focus on climate change, because it's not 100 or 200 years. It's so much earlier that it's happening.
There's a feeling of helplessness, right? There's a feeling of we cannot do a whole lot. It will require some level of political leadership and people making unpopular choices. And I don't know if we're going to have it. I really don't know.
It's easy not to be optimistic as the polarization that we're seeing politically in the country right now, and people using information that's not true. A lot of the petroleum companies initially, that some of them are changing their tune, but some of them aren't, threw out a lot of misinformation that climate change isn't real. It's just natural climate cycles. This is nothing we should be worried about. All of that's false. And yet, once you put the information out there and it gets into the internet, there's people that are going to believe it. And if you, as an oil company, invest heavily in supporting political individuals that are going to Congress or go to their state houses and support petroleum-friendly legislation, the changes are going to be much, much slower.
Politics is driven by greed. It's money that buys all the power and controls everything. You've got a recipe for disaster.
Right now, we are heading in the wrong direction, and we've been heading in this direction for decades, knowing what, you know, at least some of the consequences might be.
We need to tell our legislators that this is something we need to deal with now, not let my grandchildren deal with it.
Or making action to show the politician that you care and put pressure on them. I mean, they want to be re-elected. They want to stay in power.
Well, what can myself as an individual do, and can I really make a difference? And if I can't make a difference, then I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to go on ahead with my life. And there's several things that are wrong with that thinking. The only way that we can make a difference is if we all work together, and that means individuals and other working in as part of communities, as part of cities, as a part of states and countries, and then ultimately the world.
With very small incremental changes that we can have a large effect. There's lots we can do as long as we put our minds to it.
We really need to wake up and change our priority.
Be sustainable, not only think about yourself, but think about the consequences of what you're doing.
Think about the impact we have in our consume. I mean, in everything, in the food, in the things we buy, the water we don't use or use. We have to know it has consequences.
Do your carbon footprint. And this gives you an idea of what sort of activities you're doing that are responsible for greenhouse gases that you emit. It turns out 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions from the University of California derives from airplane travel of its faculty to international meetings. Do it via the internet, then you actually can cut back your carbon emissions by 25%.
Every one of us accepting that we have to change our lifestyle, like eating less meat, traveling less.
Eat less meat.
The production of meat on this planet and the fishing industry are the single greatest contributors to groundwater pollution, dead zones in the ocean, greenhouse gas emissions. So that could go a long way.
Electricity needs to become all biosustainable, and when those things actually change, I think that will have the biggest impact.
Insist that all new buildings have solar, but that they've gotten much cheaper and much more long-lived, and people are doing it just for economic reasons. They may be not even driven by environmental concerns.
It's always difficult because not everybody has the same ideals.
And it's also unfair that I do something and my neighbor don't.
You should start by looking at yourself.
And we need to be ready to not eat the same thing and not having access at everything at every season, for example, that we will not be able to travel as we do today, maybe taking less plane, things like this.
We have a car society.
Walking or bicycle or reduce the cars and share the travels.
I mean, the easiest thing is to control how much energy you're using. Do you need to use the car 4 or 5 times a day, or can you say, I'm going to go shopping once or twice a week, and so limit the number of trips you make with your vehicle?
If we don't act on it, there's not a very bright future.
As Dr. Gomez said, we all need to make those small, be the hero changes if we are to have any chance of surviving the devastating effects of climate change. The whale call has been a wake-up call. So what have I learned, and how has this changed my life? I've made it my mission to only eat meat twice a week. I've made it my mission to limit my air travel to 1 trip per year. I've made it my mission, whenever possible, to use my bicycle, or walk, or take public transit instead of using my car. And when my car needs to be replaced, I will replace it with a green energy option. And in the meantime, I'm still trying to be a climate change activist in my own special way. Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm sorry to bother you, but you realize that by having your car idling when you're not driving or anything, it's really not good for the environment.
Oh.
Could you maybe just shut your car off?
Oh,
And,
of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Thank you very much for helping save our planet.
Thank you for reminding me.
Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.
Many of the animals that we love today and we know about are not going to be there for our grandchildren. They'll look at them in books and they'll say, how could they have let this happen?
It's not that people don't care, it's maybe just that they're not prepared to make the sacrifices personally. It's great if somebody else has to do it.
We have to change everything, and I hope it's possible, but I don't see it too much clearly today.
You're the only one that can make an impact, because if everybody says it doesn't make a difference, then we'll never get there.
Focus on the present. What you do in the present will define what the future will be. That's where our power is. We have power in the present, but we can control the future by what we do in the present.
The truth is, I may be slashing at the windmills, and what I'm doing may be futile. But like Don Quixote, I'm fighting for what is right. I'm fighting to make a difference, and if more people just do their part, then maybe, just maybe, we can make a difference.